Drupalize.Me.
Welcome to Building Web Services with Drupal. This series is all about helping you get up to speed quickly on what web services are, how they relate to a Drupal site, and how with just a couple of modules from Drupal.org, we can create a full-featured and customized REST API for our Drupal-based applications. Web services, APIs, structured data, these things are all the rage right now, and with good reason. As more and more internet-enabled devices start wanting to make use of the data in our websites, we need to give them some way to interact with that data that isn't point and click in a browser. And that's exactly what web services do. Provide a way for applications, machines, or maybe even robots to access and make sense of our data without having to infer meaning from things like visual location on the page, which we as humans often take for granted. Apps are without a doubt the elephant in the room here, and the number one reason why most people are interested in building a web services API, so that they or someone else can then build native applications that make use of the data contained within Drupal. Here's an example. I carry around this little device in my pocket that tracks how many steps I take each day, and then logs that information to a website. The website in question provides a services API that this little guy can easily send data to and read data from, but it only gets exactly the data that it needs and nothing more. When I log into the website, however, that data is all made available to me in fancy charts and graphs, but at the end of the day, the data is still just a simple number that's displayed on the less sophisticated UI of the tracker. I could probably go on for a while about all the reasons you should build a web service API, but what you're probably really interested in is how to build a web services API. In this series, we're going to kick things off with a couple of lessons that are more theory-oriented and attempt to explain what exactly a web services API is and why you might want to build one. And since we're going to be creating a REST-based service, I'll also demystify some of the fundamental components of REST. What are HTTP verbs and what does it mean to have a resource-based API? With that basic knowledge in place, we'll use the rest of the series to walk through creating and configuring a RESTful web service using the powerful version 3 of the Services module. Drupal is a great place to start for any application that wants to expose structured data as a web service, because of the fields and content type system that permeates throughout all of Drupal 7. We're already accustomed to storing structured data and working with it via tools like views and the Entity API. The Services module builds off of this existing structure and allows us to retrieve data like users and nodes in JSON or XML or tons of other formats without really much work at all. Services will also allow us to expose actions that would normally be considered internal to Drupal. Things like triggering Drupal to send a password reset email for a user right from within your third-party app, making it so that these third-party apps have the same level of functionality as the website itself. It's really pretty amazing what you can accomplish with services in just a little bit of basic configuration. Just a few lessons into the series, we'll already have a functioning endpoint up and running, and we'll be able to retrieve nodes from Drupal as JSON objects. But there's more to creating a killer API than just enabling the Services module. So we'll also talk about the various ways that you can tweak your services endpoint configuration to customize it for your API and for your use case. I also think it's important to understand how a client is expected to make use of that API. And it helps to visualize what the different changes we make in our configuration actually mean to someone trying to access our API. So, we'll take the time to explore making queries against our API using both the curl command line application and the Chrome REST console plugin. We'll use these tools to do things like adjust the HTTP headers sent in our request to demonstrate that Services is capable of returning a response in various different formats simply based on the incoming request, illustrating some of the more powerful features of the module. Then, we'll look at using session authentication with our web service in order to allow clients to make authenticated requests. Web API speak for logging in a user. The setup for this on services side is pretty simple. But making authenticated queries from a mobile app or other client can be tricky. So we've got an entire lesson about performing this authentication handshake. As you're probably well aware, Views is one of the most popular and powerful modules for Drupal 7. And that's true when it comes to building web services as well. We'll look at using the Services Views module to expose the lists we create with views as resources to our API, and then take that even further by making use of the Views Expose Filters feature to allow more control to clients implementing our API. Having built numerous applications and written lots of code that needs to interact with the third-party web service, I feel that documentation for your API is of the utmost importance. If you don't document your API, how is anyone that doesn't have access to your codebase going to know how to interact with it? We'll end this series with a discussion of best practices for documenting RESTful APIs. There's a whole lot to cover, but by the end of this series, you should have all of the tools you need to start creating your own RESTful web services using the Services module and Drupal 7.